Hi everyone, my name is Sela Bogonko and welcome back to Zinduka. Zinduka is basically a platform that seeks to inspire, to challenge, to motivate you to be a better version of yourself, especially for the young people in this country who make up 75% of the population, which means that if we have a new crop of young people who think differently, who think futuristically, who have a vision for themselves and the country, then we'll be heading somewhere. In this new season, especially with the new government, I believe that we have an amazing opportunity to shape and to co-create our future and not just wait for the government to do stuff, but be part of nation building and actively so. We spoke in particular in the last episode to the young people, and we say that rather than waiting around for what has been promised by government, you have to be very determined to prepare yourself basically to be able to take advantage of those opportunities, but also to think as a different person. See this as a new season for you to emerge as a different version of yourself. And we at Zinduka are here to help you do exactly that. One of the things that we know has been said severally is that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So if we are to be different as a country, as young people, we have to shift how we are thinking, and that's the inspiration behind today's episode. Today, based on the many questions that I've received, especially from the young people who've been asking me about job opportunities, about how they need to prepare themselves, about how to become more competitive as candidates when they go for interviews, or even just based on what will come up given the new investments by government and the new investments by the different organizations in the next cycle of 5 years, how do they make themselves more competitive? Well, that doesn't just apply to the young people, it also applies to us as a nation. So today we get to talk about identity. Identity means your unique identifier. What is unique about you as an individual? What is unique about us as a nation? One of the things we know about America, for example, is that they are known for innovation. Italy is known for philosophy. We know China for production. We know them for manufacturing. They do that really well, and every nation usually rushes to them. When you're producing a product, that's where you go to when you want to mass produce it for the rest of the world. But what are African countries known for? The other day we were celebrating, or Uganda, our neighbor, was celebrating 60 years of independence, and we are in the 59th year of our independence. But what do we have to show for it? What is really unique about us as a country? We could say tourism. Is that still a consideration? We say we have tea, we have coffee, we say we have one of the best athletes in the world, but is that something that we can actually brag about or confidently say is our unique identifier? For the young people, what is your unique identity, the thing that distinguishes you from the next person? And this is not just about your skill, your education, or your experience, but it's a culmination of everything that comes together to make you uniquely different from the next person. Consider identity as basically your ID. The way they say that it's the thing that distinguishes you from everyone else rather. What is that thing that sets you apart from everyone? So the truth is, if you don't know your identity, it's very easy to be taken advantage of. And that's, I believe, what happened during the colonial era, when the colonialists came and they were giving us gunpowder, for example, or mirrors, or basic things that we consider basic right now, in exchange for our minerals. Which means that if we knew the value of what we had as Africans, or as Kenya, if we're to make it personal, then we wouldn't have traded in that value for basic things. Which means that if you don't know your value as an individual, if you don't know your giftings, if you don't know what sets you apart from the average person, you will miss out on so many opportunities that will come your way, or you will be taken advantage of. It's the same thing that happens in business. If you don't know what sets you apart, or if you do not create a niche for yourself, you will definitely not be able to make the maximum profit that you could in that sector. The question remains, how then do we find out our unique identity as a nation or as young people? And how do we strengthen it? How do we build that identity today? I would like to share with you 3 ways in which we can do that. The first one is know thyself. Second is lead thyself. And then thirdly is be thyself. Let's start off with know thyself. Like I said, if you don't know what your unique giftings are, you won't be able to even begin to strengthen them. As a nation, we say that we are the best in the world when it comes to tourism. We say that our tea and coffee are some of the best in the world. We say that our runners are some of the best athletes in the world, and some of these things are true by global standards. But the question remains, are we really the best in the world? Can we say that we are unique in those areas? Can we say that those areas set us apart significantly from other nations? That's a question for us to ponder as a nation and be able to answer it in the affirmative, only by making sure that we truly are the best in the world. And for the young people, when we say know thyself, what does that actually mean? Many of us draw our identity from many other sources other than the true identity that was given to us by God. For example, for me, I know and I'm confident beyond a shadow of doubt that my identity, who I am, what makes me unique when it comes to comparison with other people is the grace that has been given to me. And that's not a function of my job. That's not a function of the position that I hold. That's not a function of my education or anything in particular. It's a function of the culmination of the graces and the every other thing that I am, or every other thing that makes me unique as an individual. The second one is lead thyself. When it comes to leadership, many of us normally think that it has to do with leading other people or influencing other people towards a certain cause. But the true sense of leadership starts with self. I have to be able to have a vision of who I am, what I want to achieve, where I'm going, and it has to be drawn, like we said, from somewhere. And when that picture becomes clear, then the work becomes that I have to work deliberately on myself towards that picture. That's called self-leadership. For example, for us as a nation, we could say that we are great at tourism, but if we're to compare ourselves, for example, with Rwanda, who recently invested heavily in a state-of-the-art conference center, which is now attracting global conferences, something that Kenya was known for, both because of our airline as well as KICC. But the truth is we are losing ground, and that's just something that we need to both hear and come to terms with, and not just know it, but do something about it. It's one thing to say that we are good at tourism, but it's another thing to actually work and develop ourselves to global standards, to the point where when people are given options of whether to go to Rwanda or go to Uganda or go to any other country, they would choose Kenya distinctly so because we are truly the best at what we do. I believe that a gift that is given, whether it's in form of a talent or education, if it's not nurtured with time, it diminishes, which means that we could have been given by God the grace to have beautiful beaches and amazing, and the wildlife that we have that is an attraction globally. But if we don't deliberately work on it, we will be bypassed. And that is already happening if we were to be honest with ourselves. So again, to the leaders that are coming into office, we're looking to you, especially in this new exciting dispensation. Please do something about our tourism. Please do something about our sports people. I mean, look at Angela Okitui. She's an amazing young budding tennis player who's attracting global attention. But what are we as a country doing to support her? Look at our marathon runners. They constantly break and shatter the world records. But the honest truth is, we see our runners going to run for other countries. Why? Perhaps because they're not valued or they're not treated the way they ought to as brand ambassadors for the country. And that's why as Zinduka, we are constantly harping on the issue of opportunities, because it's not just opportunities that are created, but the kind of mindset that is required to be able to trigger opportunities, not just waiting for what the government can do, but what we can do actively as a people together, working towards the vision of distinguishing ourselves as a nation. How does that apply to young people? You as a young person have to be able to identify that picture, like we said, know thyself, what is uniquely you. And once you've identified that picture, you then have to deliberately work at evolving and becoming a better version of yourself, whether it's your physical or your financial area or even your mindset. There's so many ways in which you can mentally advance yourself. There's so many ways in which you can acquire skills and knowledge. If there's any country that has many NGOs that are investing, especially in youth empowerment, this is definitely one of them. Besides waiting for jobs, and I know that that's what our education system prepared us for. You finish, you do well, you really, get the best grades that you can, and then wait for a job or look for a job. But we have to begin shifting our mindset from waiting or looking for jobs to actually creating them. And that's what we intend to inspire you to do on Zinduka, to be able to think differently of yourself, See yourself as a solution provider. So the third and last one is be thyself. In this world, you have a lot of pressure coming from different places. We're always being told by everyone how we ought to be, or you're supposed to look, if this is the standard of beauty, or this is the career that you ought to have, or this is, this is how you ought to be. But the truth is, in this self-discovery process, whether it's us as a nation or as individuals, the minute you find out what you're really good at and what sets you apart or what is your competitive advantage, and you begin to sharpen it in various ways, then it requires boldness for you to be different. One of the ways that we can be different as a nation, for example, is just taking bold steps towards a different pathway to development. For many of the African countries, I believe that one of the reasons that we are still where we are 60 years on average later after independence is because we are constantly seeking to emulate those that have gone before us. And if we were to look, for example, in the climate change space, the reason why we have the challenge of climate change is because the pathways that were taken resulted to adverse effects, which means that we cannot follow in the footsteps of those that have gone before us when it comes to development. The same applies to our politics. We have to find a unique ideology that works for us as Africans. We have to find ourselves, whether it's democracy or communism, whatever it is, they're already tested and tried in other countries. But can we find a hybrid? Can we find a unique ideology that works for us as a people? That requires a different kind of thinking. That means that we have to be bold. We have to know who we are. We have to work at that version of ourselves, and then we have to be bold enough to be different. One of the things that our president did recently that is absolutely exciting was flagging off tea to Ghana under the Africa Free Trade Agreement, which means that we can have borderless trading or favorable trading terms across the continent. That is something that has been considered, has been deliberated on for many years. But it takes a certain kind of leadership to not just talk about it, to not just think about it, but to actually be bold enough to act on it. And for the young people, when it comes to be thyself, it just means exactly that. Don't be afraid to be different from your peers. Don't be afraid to take a different pathway compared to everyone else. Some of the greatest people, or some of the most influential people on the continent right now, are the ones that dared to go a different pathway. And that's the kind of mindset that is required, especially in this day and age when we require innovation for us to develop as a country. Gone are the days when you'd be told that you cannot go into one career or the other. You could even look at the creative industry. It's a budding industry in this country, and one that requires support from the government, but also one that requires young people who are bold enough to create new content, to inspire their peers and to inspire the nation and the world. And I believe it's possible, but you have to be bold enough to be yourself. We've spoken about tourism, we've spoken about our young people in terms of athletes, we've spoken about our tea and coffee, but what other areas do you think or do you believe are our actual unique identifiers? Are we doing well in those areas or not? Are those areas that need to be improved or not? And what can we do, or what can the government do, or what can we as a nation and as a people do to be able to distinguish ourselves even further in those areas so that they become a competitive advantage? I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts on those areas, and let's keep the conversation going even as we work together to build our nation. Thank you for joining me today on Zinduka episode 3. God bless you and see you next time.